I wanted to bring that up because that's the interesting thing about the so-called X Factor. It's like, well, it's easy to see after the fact that Stallone has
Right.
it, but trust me, man, nobody believed in him. He couldn't even get a role in a play in New York. Like nobody thought he
Right.
could do anything. Hey guys, in this video, director Sheldon Lettich and I are going to discuss that X factor that guys like Stallone and Van Damme seem to have. But it is subjective, and some people may not even see it. So Sheldon also brings up the Y and the Z factor, which may be actually equally as important in relation to the X factor. So make sure to stay until the end for that part of the discussion. Also in the video, Sheldon talks about how he was an early proponent and advocate for Scott Adkins, which I don't even know if Scott Adkins knows, but it is interesting, and he talks about a film that he was really trying to get Scott involved with. Didn't work out, but it would have probably been quite something. Anyway, speaking of Sheldon, make sure to check out his new book, From Vietnam to Van Damme, linked in the description below. It's all kinds of cool stuff in his life in the film world. I want to get your thoughts on this. One guy had mentioned that he didn't think Daniel Barnhart had like the so-called X factor, right? Like,
Right.
what are your thoughts on that? Is that the reason you think he didn't really blow up like people like Van Damme did, or do you think it was something else?
Yeah, it's just that mysterious X factor that guys like Jean-Claude have, that Arnold Schwarzenegger has, Stallone has it. Now, people have been saying the same thing about Scott Adkins, but I think Scott has really proven himself to be a movie star. And also Michael Jai White's another one. Michael's got a lot of charisma, a lot of power on the screen.
Can I laugh in your face?
Yeah, like Michael is one that Michael should have been a bigger star than he is.
It is the truth.
I don't think they had the right movie. Like Scott Adkins first got my attention and a lot of people's attention with Undisputed 2. Funny enough, that was starred opposite Michael Jai White. And that was actually a good film for what it was, especially at that time. Right. But I don't think he was able to capitalize on it. I mean, he did sequels to it, but there was not that defining role where the audience really cared. And I think the thing that helped Van Damme a lot was a movie like Lionheart.
Right,
it's like,
right.
You know, you
Lionheart
can't help but
totally
not like this guy.
Because prior to Lionheart, Jean-Claude was pretty much in the same boat as Scott Adkins is in now, the same boat that Daniel Bernhardt's in. Okay, although Van Damme, he really did shine above most other people. He had that X factor. When I introduced him to Sam Raimi, Sam saw it right away. Okay, I saw it right away when I first met Jean-Claude. When he came to my apartment, I could just see this guy's a movie star. It's just it was just something about his eyes and his face and just his character. And Sam saw it too. Perhaps with and look, I've met Scott personally. I hung out with him a lot when he was shooting assassination games.
Oh yeah, with
I was there on the set almost the entire time.
Wow.
Because Brad wanted me there just to reassure Jean-Claude, because Jean-Claude was nervous about the director. We hadn't done this kind of a movie before. Scott was really unsure as to who his character was. And he and I sat down and had lunch a number of times. And I pretty much laid it out for him. Like, this is who you are. You're basically, just think of yourself as James Bond. Your character, you're British. The original character was American. Mm-hmm. And at first, Ernie Barbarash, that's the director's name. Ernie was going to go with Scott being American, which would have made him a bit self-conscious, working on his accent. Wouldn't have been able to concentrate on his acting all that well. And I told Ernie, why don't you make him British? He is British. It makes no difference at all if he's American or British. It's the same character. So make him British and let him stay comfortable with his accent. And they did. They changed it so that he was a British character. Okay, you'll notice that if you've seen the movie. Mm-hmm. And then he was trying to figure, okay, so who is this guy? Look, you're you're a sniper, you're this elite military guy, you're James Bond. Just keep that in mind. And he did, and he was very good in assassination games. But basically, it was originally designed for Van Damme and Seagal.
Oh, that would have been insane.
That's why the other character, that's why the character that Scott played was American, because that role was written for Steven Seagal. And they just couldn't pull it together with those two guys cooperating with one another. And then so then they were looking for a replacement for Seagal. And I swear to you, I'm not just making this up. I'm the first one who said, what about Scott Adkins? All right, Scott hadn't done much at that point. What about Scott Adkins? And Jean-Claude said, I don't know about this guy. He was not sold on Scott Adkins. And the casting agent recommended Christian Slater. Okay.
That's interesting.
Can you imagine Christian Slater playing that role? All right.
I'm trying to.
yeah, no, it's a stretch.
Yeah.
And I actually spent an entire night lobbying Jean-Claude, use Scott Adkins. Trust me, this guy's perfect for the role. And they eventually went with Scott, which really made that was the first step towards a career doing action movies.
Well, the interesting thing is, so it sounded like you have been a supporter and believed and even helped Scott Adkins in many ways. But the irony, Sheldon, is that
I haven't worked with him.
Well, I hope Sheldon Lettich and Scott Adkins works together sometime. Check this video out right here, linked in the description below for more info on that.
I'm going to add one more to this that I didn't talk about in my book. Okay, it's a little secret, but I'm going to add one more project that I advocated on behalf of Scott. That's Safe, Jason Statham movie.
Oh, really?
Yes, directed by my friend Boaz Yakin, and I was lobbying Boaz. I said, "Get Scott Adkins. This guy's terrific." And there was supposed to be a big fight at the end. Okay, Boaz totally wimps out with the ending because he knew he couldn't do a good fight scene with Jason Statham and the guy that they picked. They got this guy Anson Mount, maybe was his name. But that's who the producers and the studio wanted. They thought he's going to be the next hot item. And I'm telling, and the original script had a big knockdown, drag out fight between the Jason Statham character and the other guy. Okay. And I was lobbying Boaz, and Boaz agreed with me, and he liked the idea of Scott Adkins. I don't know if they ever made an offer. They didn't, because the producers wanted this other guy, this Anson Mount guy. So have you seen Safe?
I'm trying to think. I know I've seen quite a few Statham ones, and funny enough, him and Scott Adkins did fight each other in Expendables 2 at least.
Right, yeah. So,
but I'm trying to remember Safe because Statham puts out so many. I said, like, even the more recent one I've seen within the last 6 months, I can't even remember the name, but I know it was damn good. Like, he still puts out some quality films that kind of harken back to that era, the 80s and 90s.
This script was written by Boaz, and Boaz is a really good writer, and it had some real heart to it. Jason Statham was reluctant to do it. Boaz wrote the script without any actor in mind. Actually, it's funny. Boaz did have somebody in mind, but it was too late to use him because the character's name is Luke. Okay, Luc. Boaz was, as he was writing it, he was thinking Jean-Claude in that role.
Luke Devereaux, yeah, sure.
Yeah, that's what he was thinking was Jean-Claude. It just wasn't the right time to hire Jean-Claude to do a movie like that. And Statham was much bigger and moving up. And so the studio gave him two choices. You either get Jason Statham or Vin Diesel.
Oh, that would have been cool too, sure.
So Vin Diesel, apparently his sister reads all his scripts, all the projects that are sent to him. And the sister didn't like it. This is what Boaz heard. So they didn't have Vin Diesel. But then they got Jason Statham interested. with one stipulation, that Lawrence Bender was the producer, and Lawrence had produced
The Quentin
all
Tarantino guy, the guy from
Tarantino's
Lionheart.
movies. Yeah.
I can fucking kick this guy's ass. See this shit, man?
I know, baby. I know.
Not bad.
And their one stipulation was that Lawrence could not just be a producer sitting back home looking at dailies. Lawrence had to be on the set every day,
Okay.
and then Jason will do the movie. And so Boaz and Lawrence decided, okay, you'll be on the set every day, and he was there every day. I actually visited the set. I was there for a few days, visiting, just to hang out with Boaz. And I was there when they were doing this big shootout in a gambling den in Chinatown. Okay, and they had all these actors there that I had worked with before. We all went out to Chinatown in Philadelphia and hung out. But there was like Simon Rhee. I don't think Philip Rhee was there. Simon Rhee and Philip Tan and just a number of others. And yeah, we were all kind of happy to see one another on the set.
Sure.
Yeah, if you haven't seen the film, you should check it out. There's a lot of great action scenes in it. Boaz did a really great job with this movie, and Jason gives a really great performance in it too. So I would advise that. But yeah, when you see the end scene, the guy that was the guy that fights Jason Statham really should have been Scott Adkins.
Sure.
And Boaz would have had a great action scene, but because he had this guy Anson Mount, who really wasn't a fighter.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I won't give it away, but basically the fight ends abruptly. And so many people have complained about that. I told Boaz, the audience is going to fucking hate you for doing this, okay? Because there's no fight. Jason Statham movie, you're breaking the Fred Astaire rules here. You got to have a big fight at the end. But no, they didn't. They didn't.
Interesting. Wow, copped out on that.
Yeah. Otherwise, I think otherwise you would know that movie. All right, if you know Jason.
Yeah, actually, I remember the trailer, like, but I never seen it. But when you're describing him, like, yeah, I remember the marketing for that.
Right, and it's a really good movie, really good script. There's a lot of great things about it, so I would highly recommend.
I have
it.
to put that on my watch list. Sure.
Mm-hmm.
You know, circling back to why they just don't make them like they used to. Movies like Double Impact, and it kind of circling back to why Scott Adkins and Michael Jai White aren't bigger stars, because they don't have a movie of that quality or that caliber as Double Impact. Like, they just don't. If they did, they'd be much bigger stars, in my opinion.
Mm-hmm.
There's not a movie they got that people so fondly remember that was done so well. It's unfortunate.
You have a very, very good point. So because there are people online saying, oh, it's all because Scott doesn't have the same charisma as Van Damme, or Michael Jai White doesn't have the same charisma as Wesley Snipes. But Wesley Snipes did some pretty damn good movies, and so did Jean-Claude. And maybe it's maybe that's the if the X factor is the charisma, maybe the Y factor and the Z factor are the movie itself. The movie itself's got to be good. It's got to
that plays a huge part.
People.
You need it all. You need it all.
That's what makes Rocky such a great movie. The first Rocky.
I wanted to bring that up because that's the interesting thing about the so-called X Factor. It's like, well, it's easy to see after the fact that Stallone has it, but trust me, man, nobody believed in him. He couldn't even get a role in a play in New York. Like, nobody thought he could do anything. So he had to write it himself and prove everybody wrong.
In the early 70s, I went to New York with great ambition, and I went there to be an actor. And let me just tell you, that was a bomb out. Man, did I crater. It was not pretty. I wasn't one of those lucky guys that say, you're not what we're looking for. You know, you slur, you're this, you're that, you're kind of a type, you're thuggish, whatever term they used. And some of it was pretty damn brutal.
Leave! Get out of here! I didn't want you for the setup in the first place.
The X Factor people talk about, it's like some people don't see it until after the fact. Of course he's a big star now that he's made these movies.
I'll tell you, when I saw Rocky for the first time, it was when it opened in theaters. I go and see it with a girlfriend. Okay, we watch this movie. I totally saw it. And after the movie ended, the credits are rolling. I turned to my girlfriend. I said, "Would you mind sitting through that again?" That's the only time I've done that. We just stayed in our seats. We waited for the next show, and I watched the movie a second time, and liked it just as much, if not more.
The X factor is magnified if they're in the right movie.
If they're in the right movie, absolutely.
Then it's just magnified.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Well, then Rocky 2 didn't work nearly as well.
It was
It was
good
okay.
and successful, and
But Rocky 3, I thought, kicked ass. I love
that's
that.
one of the greatest movies on the planet.
It's one of the, yeah. Mickey is the one who dies in
Yeah.
Rocky 3.
Yeah.
And that was very, see, there again, that's got nothing to do with the action. It's all about heart. It's all about character. You know, when Mickey dies, that was a very affecting scene. And
Well,
then
you need a roller coaster of different emotions, build up, anticipation. And like you mentioned, they don't spend enough time on a lot of these scripts with the proper story structure and the peaks and valleys. It's just like, hey, let's write another action scene. Let's write another action scene.
Like film critics certainly weren't saying, they were not praising movies like Lionheart and Double Impact when those came out, but the audiences were loving them.
I think a lot of those critics were probably jealous. Trust me, if they could look like Rambo or move like Van Damme, you know, they feel lesser as a man, probably, you know.
And we had no social media at the time, so you couldn't see what people were saying online. You know, basically, people were loving these movies, telling their friends about them, watching them multiple times. Nowadays, you can get on the internet right away. You can do interviews and talk about all this stuff.
Yeah, it's crazy nowadays. A completely different world.